Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture, the show where we discuss science, technology, and culture in its myriad of forms. My name is Ben Warner, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. It's been a while, but we're finally back online. So how are we going today, Steve?
Oh, I'm good, thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. Yeah, online again. I think that's been part of the problem for me. Taken away from me for a few weeks. Luckily, we're back.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we broadly discuss what it means to be forced offline, we'll just explain a little bit of the fact that we've been off for a few weeks. Initially, that was a little bit of scheduling, but then we discovered we were totally offline and disconnected. And as we'll discuss in a more general sense later, you realize that I think, we've gotten to the point, we've been doing this for about 5 years now, and you take for granted that this thing will just work. And when it doesn't, you can't do it.
No, that's absolutely right.
As you discovered. And so the question then becomes, do we have to work around this? Is it, or is it just stuff doesn't get done while you're in, you're in exile, so to speak?
Yeah, that's right. Digital exile. That's a good point.
So what was that experience like for you, Steve? Do you want to take that across and just maybe explain a little bit, maybe just in general terms?
Okay, we won't name any names, but basically, my internet was disconnected. My line got given to someone else in the street for one reason or another. That's one of those things that happen, and the response of my ISP was basically to say, okay, we'll just reconnect you anytime in the next 2 weeks. And they waited for a full 2 weeks for it to happen. It was beyond their control, to be fair. So 2 weeks without internet, Ben, that's a long time in internet. And you realise how inconvenient it is.
I can imagine, because we've grown so accustomed to being connected so much of the time, and almost all the time. Our phones are connected all the time, etc. And you almost wonder, well, we obviously got by all right, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, but is it that we've got all of these new innovations that have come through, and using anything that's connected to the internet have just sort of enriched our lives to the point where once we lose it, it can be very hard to go back to that, pre-quarter century era.
Absolutely true. I mean, these are first world problems, but there's no workaround. So we've got a holiday booked, and we lost the internet. And how do you book accommodation? Maybe you can do it on your phone, but it's not really the best way using your 3 or 4G or whatever you've got. How do you digest the vast amount of information you need to in holiday planning? Yeah. All those sorts of things was really, really difficult. Don't cry. It's not tragic, but that's the point. It makes it very hard, even for the simplest of things, booking things, anything at all, and just having access, to your streaming services. So your entertainment systems go down. It's lots of little things in the knock-on effect, which could we live without? Well, obviously we did, and I made a pact with myself. I wouldn't get worked up about it and be the sort of guy screaming at people on the phone, because I knew it wouldn't make any difference. So you just had to sit there and wait it out. 5-10 years down the track with the Internet of Things, maybe at that point, my Tesla wall unit is selling electricity back to the outside and all those sorts of things. My fridge is talking to the grocer. I don't know what connectivity we'll have, but potentially it could be disastrous, because you just won't be able to go about, I guess, your normal things, because the normal way of doing things will be online.
Well, just as a small example, we talked before we got on about the Telstra outage that happened about a week ago, where basically their entire network went down. So anyone that had a a device on the Telstra network basically didn't work, and obviously they compensated, they apologized and compensated with free data and all that sort of things. But that's the 3-hour window, I think it was enough to get so many people fired up and almost curling up into the fetal position when they realized they couldn't call people. I, for instance, I've got a work Telstra phone, and I was trying to call the building manager that I liaise with at work, and he's on a Telstra phone, and there was no way, and he wasn't in his office, so there was no way for me to get in contact with him when I needed to. That to me seemed like a fairly fundamental sort of thing to go down, and that was only for 3 hours. So
yeah, the irony on that for me is I'm with Telstra as well, and I was at work, and I didn't notice at all because I didn't try and call anyone or do anything with my phone. But if you have to do something, it is highly disruptive. If you have a business, or if your connectivity on that morning is essential for you to achieve what you need to achieve, then it is chaos.
Just a final point on this topic before we move on to Apple and its encryption battle with the FBI in America. The last thing to probably point out is that there's a transition occurring in terms of how we do things, because you think 10 years ago we were, it was physical media we were using, especially when we were interacting with our computers. We probably only had the one computer maybe or two. They were workstations. We didn't have the mobile devices that we have now. And as more and more devices start getting connected, and we transition away from things like physical media where there's no like, for instance, and this is a silly one obviously, but if Netflix goes down because your internet's gone,
did my house bed?
Basically your entertainment options, if that was how you were wanting to watch things, that's gone. But 10 years ago, you would have had, your DVD box sets, just sitting on the shelf, and you could just pop it in and watch it straight away. And that's the difference. Now, that's probably a light example and a probably frivolous example, but if you expand that out across a whole lot of different things, if all of our data is online, if it's all digital, it doesn't have a physical form, it's all electronic, and our connection to it is the internet, and then it goes down, then that could cause some real problems.
Well, you're right, and I don't think it is trivial. It is, if like me, you're going to say, well, I couldn't get Netflix for 2 weeks. That's trivial. But the reality is we've now got an online economy which, is recognised by governments and business around the world. If I can claim compensation, which in my situation of going offline I can't, but the Telstra people could, and that's why Telstra gave the free time on the Sunday afterwards. I couldn't, and probably didn't. I mean, we didn't make a SciTech culture, but I couldn't do any Netflix. So does Netflix have a right then to claim from my service provider for not providing the service for me to spend money with Netflix? They're the sorts of things, because we've seen that in the same time frame, Ben, as you'd remember when electricity used to go out in the 70s. Everyone just dealt with it. It was a blackout. That's the way it goes. Now, electricity goes down and people send bills to the electricity company for all the food that was in their freezer.
Yeah.
It's like, shops, send bills, and apparently like the electricity suppliers liable for the blackout, lost trade. So it does make you wonder, that's surely the way the internet will go, which means an outage like I experienced will be financially expensive for someone.
Well, I mean, if they better have some redundant fail-safe systems and things like the stock market and all sorts of other things. Obviously they would, but if anything like that went out, if it went out for a day or two,
if you can't trade and you need to trade at that point in time, there could be millions of dollars on the line.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, I'm sure we haven't heard the last of that one. So next time it happens, we'll be right on it. But there may be a delay by the time we get the episode to you. That's the only thing. All right, we'll move on to a case that I think we've not specifically touched on in this way, but we've alluded to in previous episodes, and this idea of how secure is our data online, I guess, in a general sense. And the story that's just been coming out of America with the US government through the FBI wanting to compel Apple to create a backdoor into iOS so it can, you basically using this example of the San Bernardino shooter being able to break into his phone because they can't do it at the moment. The encryption's that good that they need Apple to write a backdoor into it. And their point of view is, well, it's just this one time. We're not asking you to do it for every phone, and it's only for this particular phone. But Apple's point, and I might read some bits out of Tim Cook's open letter here shortly, just to say what he's saying. But it's the crux of it is that he's basically saying you break open one iPhone, you break them all open. Essentially. Yeah, we can if we give this to you, there's no way to properly secure that technology so that it may fall into the wrong hands, and then all of a sudden, and not only that, it's even if it was, they did have the ability to secure it so that it didn't fall into the wrong hands. It sets the wrong precedent because then you'd have other governments coming in and saying, well, if you did it for the US, then why can't you're going to have to do it for us? And then all of a sudden it just blows open the whole thing. And essentially iPhones in this case would be completely unsecured and could be looked into at any point. And then obviously there'd be a flow-on effect to other phones. And that's pretty it's pretty full on and dangerous, I think, if you look at the wider picture.
I don't think that the government or the FBI actually understand what they're asking, because at that point then, if you unsecure any network, which is effectively what you would be doing, if that tool got out, people have all their personal financial data on their phones. I mean, you've got to look at the risks, and the risk to national security through unsecuring everyone's iPhone, which is what this tool would do, would be disastrous. I think the interesting thing in this particular case is, and I'm not 100% sure, but firstly, I know it's an iPhone, iPad design issue. So obviously, if on our MacBooks we were to lose the password, we can crack them, no problem. I think you can actually go to the Apple store and they'll do it for probably free. If you go to someone else, they might charge you a little bit. Reboot, but they can unlock it. The hardware of the iPhones and the iPads mean that you have to have the iOS that's installed on the device, and you have to unlock it. When you type in your PIN number, effectively that unlocks the device. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I've heard unconfirmed reports that Apple can actually unlock iPhones themselves.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is what the FBI is asking for. They're not asking for Apple to unlock the phone. They're asking for a tool to unlock the phone.
Yeah.
And that's where the danger is. So obviously if we go to Apple headquarters in Cupertino and you hand them over the phone and they go into a room out the back, that probably only Steve Jobs and, a dozen other people have ever been into, they can plug it in, probably get all the data off it. But like you're saying, if you create a tool, and anyone who even has a moderate knowledge of the internet, if someone makes a tool, it's going to be available somewhere out there within a few months. And Apple has spent, obviously, as they claim in that open letter, years generating the security system.
Well, I think in particular with the current generations of iPhones and iPads that they've actually stored all of the encryption on the device now. So if you can't bypass the security, you're not getting in at all. So
that's right.
And
that's absolutely right.
And that's what the main issue is. But but sounds even again, the technical part of it escapes me a little bit, but it's got something to do with iOS. When it boots up, it looks for a signature to say that Apple created the iOS software, and that's why, like, if you try to do some sort of hack over the top job, it's actually impossible without the Apple verified digital signature, which is which only obviously Apple can provide. So for the FBI to come in and say, yeah, they could probably create that tool themselves, but they actually want Apple to attach their digital signature to it, so that the phone recognizes it as an Apple, piece of software. That's just, it sets a dangerous precedent. And apart from that, it also puts Apple in an awkward position, because essentially it's basically forcing them to destroy their own product.
That's right. And the really scary thing here is, I wonder if that's the same case on an Android phone.
Well, there's been talk that I've seen on the internet that hasn't been much coming out from the other tech companies in terms of their response to it.
Which I would hope that they would come out and support Apple. But if an Android phone doesn't have that security that an iPhone does because of the special Apple closed system and iOS, in that case, then the FBI is probably already listening to you through Google.
And they're, 90% of the smartphone market, aren't they?
Well, it makes you wonder, in which case then Android must really be a very insecure platform. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to read a couple of bits out of the open letter here. And basically it starts off with the US government's demanded that Apple take an unprecedented step which threatens the security of our customers. We oppose this order, which has implications far beyond the legal case at hand, which is and the FBI is just saying, oh, no, it's only just about this particular case. They say in there there's a need for encryption. All that information needs to be protected from hackers and criminals who want to access it, steal it, and use it without our knowledge or permission. Customers expect Apple and other technology companies to do everything in our power to protect their personal information, and at Apple, we are deeply committed to safeguarding their data. And when they're talking about the San Bernardino case, they're saying we have no sympathy for terrorists. And they've been cooperating with the FBI to try and get some of this actually going. But here's the crux of it. The FBI may use different words to describe this tool that they were asking them to create, but make no mistake, building a version of iOS that bypasses security in this way would undeniably create a backdoor. And while the government may argue that its use would be limited to this case, there is no way to guarantee such control. And that's pretty much the crux of it. It sets a dangerous precedent, and Tim Cook then goes on to say things about the implications of the government's demands are chilling. If the government can use a particular act that they're trying to rely on here to make it easier to unlock your iPhone, it would have the power to reach into anyone's device to capture their data. The government could extend this breach of privacy and demand that Apple build surveillance software to intercept your messages, access your health records or financial data, track your location, or even access your phone's microphone or camera without your knowledge. And they're saying, while we believe the FBI's intentions are good, it would be wrong for the government to force us to build a backdoor into our products. And ultimately, we fear that this demand would undermine the very freedoms and liberty our government is meant to protect. And just on that, though, one other thing is they want to crack into this phone. Say if the FBI gets a warrant, they need to get into this, they're looking at everything to do with someone they're looking at. They get the person's phone, but maybe they only want certain data on the phone. They're not actually not looking at other things. But the thing is, they're going to have access to it all anyway the minute they break into it. And what's to stop them from taking it all, so to speak?
Well, that's right. I mean, what I find really disconcerting, though, and I actually think the arguments should centre on, is understand Apple's argument about the government overreaching. And there's no question in this case they probably are. But I think everyone would agree in terms of national security, that's not a huge issue. The question is, and we've already said this today, but if that tool gets out there beyond the government, and I know they'll give us every assurance that it won't, but if the security of your data on your phone today is compromised by a third party who's not the government, who doesn't have your best interests at heart, you could effectively collapse the entire system.
Yeah.
If every iPhone was able to be manipulated or taken out, we've already talked about denial of service, whether it's an internet line or just taken out, what would be the economic implications of that? I wouldn't want to be the government that had to stand up and try and fix the iPhone disaster which it caused.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe this is the sort of thing now that we've been talking about for years with regard to privacy online, that, this could be the sort of thing that could have ramifications far beyond the FBI getting clues as to what this particular, terrorist was doing. You could bring down everyone with an iPhone. You could destroy Apple as a business.
Yeah.
And that's not good for anyone.
The interesting thing too is that you get, obviously it's going to go to lawmakers and all that sort of thing, go to that level, and these people don't necessarily know or understand, or at least the exact nuances and detail of what's being asked for here. So then you'll get, especially in America where they're very patriotic, you'll get these types of people saying things like, oh, well, Apple's supporting terrorists, they have to help the FBI kind of thing.
I've already seen those memes online, and it's just like, you don't get it.
But the thing is, and again, I'm no expert on the American Constitution, but isn't there something in there about protecting liberty and all that sort of thing, and your personal right to your own freedom and privacy and whatnot? That's part of it as well. And Apple's basically going to bat for that on that part of it, and they seem to be conveniently ignoring it, because I guess when they're saying things like, we're going to when it's terrorists involved and all that, it becomes an emotional issue, and that always trumps reason a lot of the time.
That's right. That's right. I just think the wider implications are really concerning. I'm not concerned about the government at all in this situation, but, I'm more concerned about the fact that once you open up a Pandora's box like this, you can't stop it. You can't put that iOS back in the box once it's out there. We've seen all sorts of data breaches in the last 12 months, which have been quite low down on the scale. Whether it's Sony or Ashley Madison, it doesn't matter. They're just good old-fashioned, get in there, get a whole lot of data, and it's spread all over the internet. Target came up. They've all been, David Jones in Australia, all been, compromised. Yeah. If you have individual access into people's identities via their phones, and let's face it, they're already predicting that within 2 to 3 years, 80% of transactions will be through near-field communications. Yeah. They're saying that your ATM card or your Visa card will be replaced by your phone. That's our economy. That's the world economy that almost broke through a GFC. You'd hate for some hackers to do worse than the GFC by just wiping out a whole lot of people, and then you get the Orwellian sort of thing where you don't have an account, so you don't exist, so we can't help you because you don't have an account. A bit like my online experience for the last couple of weeks. I really think that if anyone really thought about it, this is no way for a government to exert power over a corporation, even though the reason might be legitimate and it might be right to a certain extent. This is certainly not the right way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. I think because this will get tied up in the courts, I'm sure, for quite some time, we can keep coming back to it because, we've talked about it before, and now it seems like we're coming closer to an actual real case here of where there could be some serious problems.
Yeah, exactly. And, the implications privacy-wise, as I say, it's one thing to have, details hacked. It's another thing to be able to assume somebody else's identity and control their access.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so to wrap it up, don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links there. We've done a little bit of a visual overhaul. I like playing around with some of the themes there in WordPress. I'd like to build my own at some point, but have to kind of teach myself how to do that. But we'll get there at some stage. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google+, and Facebook, so I'd love to hear from you. And if you think anyone's interested in these frequent discussions that Steve and I have on a regular basis, feel free to send them to SciTechCulture.com. We'd greatly appreciate that. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.